Good afternoon. I'm the Reverend Dr. Guillermo Marquez Sterling, Associate Pastor here at this church, Pass-A-Grille Beach Community Church, United Church of Christ. Normally speaking, an echo means that God is talking to us. Let me go ahead and see if I can remedy the situation. I'll be right back. 1 second, please. It's out? Okay. All right. So good to have you here, each and every one of you. It is my privilege to officiate at this service of remembrance and celebration for the life of Barbara Dawn Barber, born Barbara Dawn Benedict on September 13th, 1950 in Gulfport. She was a lifelong community member of St. Pete Beach, Pass-A-Grille Beach, and St. Petersburg proper. There's much to be said about Barbara. What is pertinent to us right here now is that she was also known as May, in case there's somebody that is not aware of that. And Bob, her husband of 57 years, is known as Pop. And so May passed on the 30th of July of this year after a battle with an immunity-related illness. But her love and the energy of her life, a life well lived, is still with us here on this day. So as we move through this service of remembrance and celebration, let us keep in mind that it is more than just a life that we are remembering. It is the myriad of lives that were improved, touched, because she was with us. And so now I ask you to please rise as you're able, and please turn to the program and join me in the call to worship. God is our light and our salvation. Whom shall we fear? One thing we have asked and continue to seek, for in the day of our passing, the Lord God shall take us by the hand. You may be seated. I now call for Harry, who is going to read a poem specifically with May in mind.
I am not a poet, but when an integral piece of the family puzzle is moved, it brings thoughts to your mind. This is something I just wrote down thinking of Barb. In 2016, I had a stroke. When I got out of the hospital, Barb organized a family dinner twice a week, and we've been doing that for 6 years. That's what she did. She put families together, and she put love first. So Barb, we thought of you today. But that is nothing new. We thought about you yesterday, and the day before that too. We think of you in silence and often speak your name. We have lots of wonderful memories and your picture in a frame. Your memories are our keepsake, with which we will never part. God has you in his keeping. We have you in our hearts.
Scripture readings for this service are going to be four actually, but the first two come from the Old Testament, and I could now call forward Jenny to read from the book of Isaiah and from the book of Proverbs.
Thank you all for coming today. It means a lot to our family to share a special time with you in remembrance of Barb, our sister. She was the middle child of 5. Her dad called her B-Don, but we, her siblings, called her Bobsy. That nickname stuck until she was well into her 20s, and we could no longer call a grown woman with 2 kids Bobsy any longer. She then became known to us as Barb. She grew up with 3 other sisters, of which I am the oldest, and she never hesitated to refer to me as such. Speaking today also for our mom, Louise, I asked her what she wanted me to say, and she said the very same thing she told Barb in the hospital the last time she saw her. She kissed her on the cheek, and she said, "You were always a good girl." It doesn't get much sweeter than that. To me, as a sister, she was a rock and became my partner in caring for our mom, which she did with love and diligence. Nothing was a bother for her as long as you had a plan. If you presented her with a plan to get something done, that she could work with, and work well she did in whatever she set out to accomplish. As sisters and brother, we were all different, but we had one thing in common that Barb excelled in. We each loved our children, and we loved each other's children with a sincere heart. Both her brother Harv and younger sister Carol share with me in saying that she left an impact on our lives that will not be filled overnight. But the sweet memory of her and the hope that she will forever live in eternity with our Lord Jesus Christ allows us to grieve with hope and joy that we will yet see her again. I would like to read a portion of Proverbs 31, a chapter in the Bible where there's a mother of a king giving him advice on what type of wife to look for. As I read this, I am sure that many of you will be able to relate to the character of this woman to our sister Barb, and also to you, Bob, as a wife. A wife of noble character, who can find? She is worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. She works with eager hands in her home, and she provides food for her family. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her task. She sees that her purchases are profitable. She opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children raise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Honor her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. My last text to Barb was to encourage her, was from Isaiah 41:10. And it says, "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." I believe that God kept his promise in that verse that I just read for Barb, and that he will keep it in eternity for all those who believe. Just a final thought. I believe that although Barb may have suffered at the end of her life, it was a brief suffering. And if she could speak to us today, I'm sure that she would want us to concentrate on how blessed and rich her life truly was. Just a short poem that Harry wrote, another poem for Barb. He said, "Those we love don't go away. They walk with us each and every day. Unseen, unheard, but always near. She loved, she still missed, still loved, and forever dear." So, Barb, you'll be dearly missed as a sister, but you'll never be forgotten. Thank you.
On the program, it says that we're going to be having a pastoral prayer. A pastoral prayer is one where the pastor prays for the people. And I recognize my role and my duty and what I've been trained for, but often I think the best pastors are those who guide the people to be able to pray themselves as well. In a room where I'm not really quite well acquainted with everybody, I have always several assumptions. And one of them is that not everybody understands God the way that I do. And that's a pretty safe assumption. Another assumption I have is that most of us cannot put into words what's in our hearts, that the language is a barrier, and there's not enough vocabulary to correctly express what's in our hearts. So, knowing, biblically speaking, that God reads our hearts and not our lips, God listens to the vibrations of our soul, not so much the grammar or the syntax of our sentences. At some point during this prayer, I'm going to provide a moment of silence, and that is so that each and every one of you could have your own prayer at that time, that silence might be able to be a sacred moment that we hold. For those of you who come from traditions where silence is central to the worship service, that's not going to be it on this time. It's probably just going to be half a minute. First, to take a nice deep breath, to get centered. To clear from your mind anything that is distracting. And let us join our hearts in prayer. Good and gracious God, Mother and Father to us all, on this day we have gathered as your people. We have gathered as a community of friends and family to remember Barbara, better known to many of us as May, and known to you as your instrument of love, peace, your instrument of joy and laughter, your instrument of speaking what needs to be said. We know, oh God, that your Spirit worked through her in her lifetime, that often you used her voice for the words that you wanted to be said. You used her hands and feet for the work that needed to be done. You used her life to bring forth that which your Spirit wanted to create. And we are grateful. We are grateful, God, that you have placed her in the midst of this community and that she was your servant. For surely everybody in this room and in the broader community is better because she lived. For those of us who are left behind, for those of us who are grieving, for a husband of 57 years, for a family that has lost their matriarch, we pray that your Spirit provide for them comfort, strength, wisdom, and understanding. And that as the day progresses, we might be able to lean on each other, providing for us a symbol of what is to come, of how a community gathers together during times of loss. We know, O God, that you have received her into your arms the way that a mother receives a child, that she is now on your side of creation, enjoying your light and your divinity. And although we are left here with questions and mysteries and darkness, she is basking in that supreme state of divine awareness. And she's possibly looking down upon us at this moment with amusement. May you consecrate this day as you consecrated her life. May you consecrate her memory and put into the hearts of each and every one of us the virtues that she best exemplified, the virtues that she wanted to pass on and teach for everyone else to learn. Listen to our hearts, O God, as we each silently lift up our prayers to you. Remembering the words of Jesus, who while here on earth taught us to pray, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. So for the remembrances from the family members, call them up in two groups. Will Billy, Brenda, and Wayne please come forward? And then once they're done, we will hear from Todd and Joe.
Good afternoon. I'm Billy, the youngest son. My family and I thank all of you for attending today. I have spent the past few weeks thinking what and how I could explain what Mom meant to me. Our family was sports driven, so build a team, you need a coach, and that was Mom. Mom would make sure Dad, Bobby, and I would start out every day the right way, with a meal, a sports page, and a positive send-off. Mom always had a way of finding the positive in just about anything. I can recall one time I had to go to summer school. I was afraid no one was going to pick me up, so Mom decided, let's jump on a bike and we'll ride 6 miles to school. She would wait outside the classroom door for 4 hours until class was over. Mom was just not Mom. She was my friend and #1 fan. I remember the time I was around 9 or 10, I wanted to pitch, and Dad was working and Bobby was at practice. Mom grabbed the catcher's glove and said, let's go. Now to me, that's a special mom. As I got older, Mom was right there in the stands for Little League, high school, and college baseball. Her voice I will never forget because I heard hers over anyone's. I apologize to coaches in the crowd, but Mom knew right, throw strikes. I can remember a time when I was getting ready to play Dunedin High School. I was so nervous I even got up early and went to Pasadena Church to say a prayer that we'd win. Mom was waiting for me when I came home, and she said, it's game day, it's time to get a meal. And she asked where I was, and I said, well, Mom, I went down the road to Pasadena Church to pray. And she says, believe in you, and you will win. Mom always made sure she was teaching you something about life. So when you left the nest, you were ready for life. I can remember leaving for college. She would say, keep growing, and you will be fine. Mom was always about growing and to find a positive, but she had no problem throwing you a curve to challenge you. Mom knew how much I respected my brother and all he had done in baseball. She would say, work hard and you can do the same. Boy, did Mom do the same. She worked hard and she kept 3 men going in the right direction. I will now go back to the word coach. It wasn't about a baseball field. It was about life. Who was Mom? Look at the picture next to me. Look at the smile. Mom was also known as May to my son, the grandkids, and great-grandkids. I am so thankful that she had precious time with all of them. Mom always had one-liners with the grandkids. When the Bucks and Rays were on, it was winner, winner, chicken dinner, or oogie boogie bad luck. Mom wanted to win. By looking in front of me today, Mom has won. I see so many faces I haven't seen in years. Mom was kind to all, and it shows today. I miss you, Mom. I love you. Mom is gone, but Mom will never be forgotten. Thank you again for showing today.
Hello, I'm stepping in for Brenda. She's not with us, but I'm going to do my best. And this is a speech by Brenda and all of us that worked with her. When Brenda started at Sears Hair Salon, Barbara was the first person to help me get adjusted to my new job and help me with any questions I had. She was full of energy and would help anyone that needed it. We worked closely together for many years and stood and become close friends, just like sisters. As years went by, we all became like family rather than co-workers. We all said our beauty shop family, God, finally decided we needed an Energizer bunny so he could wrap his arms around you and take you home. And I'm sure, like everyone here today, you will be missed for a very, very long time. And you're always in our hearts. And we love you, Barbara. Thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Wayne Benedict, and I am the first cousin of Barb. And from here on out, I'm going to call her Bobsy because that's what I know her as. When Bob and Bobsy got married, they lived with us for a short time. I know Mom enjoyed having Bobsy around. She was the only girl, and soon Bob and Bobsy became part of our family. At a recent family reunion, when Barb greeted me, she called me her favorite cousin. A title gratefully accepted. In our adult years, all us cousins struck out in different directions, slay our own dragons. We saw very little of one another with the exception of family funerals where we would often joke, we gotta stop meeting like this. But thinking it through, this is exactly the kind of event where we should meet like this, reconnect, grieve, and support one another. Although our lives have been separate, the foundation for a lifetime relationship has been put in place in our youth. I cannot tell you about Bob and Bobsy because I know very little the basics like their sons and that they vacation up north. Sadly, I know little more, except for the fact that Barb really enjoyed beating Bob in golf, a game that she loved and a husband that she loved. Of course, the obvious must be mentioned, her good looks and her refusal to age. I think the reason for that is she was happy. An old Chinese proverb says, you are on the outside how you feel on the inside. She indeed was young at heart. To all the young people here today, this is what it means to be part of a family. There were four families in my dad, Bob's generation. Bob's siblings are Harold, Pat, and Tom. Pat raised her family in New Jersey, and we saw them occasionally. Tom raised his family first in Minnesota, then in St. Petersburg, and it wasn't until adulthood that I have come to know them better and found the reconnect was long overdue and well worth it. Each one of those four families is represented here today. Harold and Bob and their wives were close friends. 9 children got along great. Bobsy was one of these kids. There was a period when the two families did everything together. We went out in a boat, played at the Pass-A-Grille beach, went to the Skyview Drive-In, sat on blankets in front of the automobiles, and we would eat McDonald's French fries that were that long back then. And there was always the Little League baseball game in Gulfport, because Cousin Harvey was playing, and they had snow cones. Great, not necessarily in that order. I like my snow cone. When Harold Benedict's moved to Pass-A-Grille, we saw them, but not as much. Memories jumping off the bayway with Harvey, pool hopping in the motels on St. Pete Beach, and catching bait at Hubbard's Pier still makes me smile. I tell you all this to let you know Bobsy was very much part of this life until this guy named Bob won her attention. He was an all right guy, but the best part about it is that we shared a questionable sense of humor, along with his brother-in-law Frank. I like them both. It takes a long time to grow old friends, and the foundation of old friendship and strengthening by common DNA. By osmosis, the spouse and the cousin are one. In Barb's memory, I would like to encourage the next 2 generations to seek relationships with cousins so foundation building begins for a lifetime of friendship. Besides, you might need a kidney someday.
So my name's Joe Zabo, and I'm first cousin to Bob. And Barb was such an important part of our family. When I think of Barb, there are 2 things that quickly jump out. One is the Energizer Bunny, her energy, and how she just, could exude that energy, bring it into a room, and everybody else would feel it. The second thing that stands out is the way that she never met a stranger that stayed a stranger very long. Within 20 minutes, anybody that she met, she would know their life story, and they would likely become lifelong friends. I remember the first time that I met Barb. I was about 7 years old, and Bobby had just been born. They made the trip up to Chicago to meet the family. I didn't know my cousin at that point. I'd grown up in Chicago, he had grown up in Florida. But I knew how important my cousin Bob was because of the way that my parents talked about him, my grandparents talked about him, and so I knew Bob was special. And that meant that Barb was special, right? She's now entering our family. And so I remember this, 1965. In our kitchen. And she's right in the middle of everything, right? She's brand new to this family, but she's right in the middle of everything with my mom and my grandma, helping put together the big family feast. And so she became that day an integral part of our extended family. Certainly a daughter to my parents and a sister to me and my siblings. The annual trips that Bob and Barb, Bobby and Billy would make up to Chicago were always so special. That was my home, but it was like a vacation for us. These are just some of the most cherished memories, those annual trips that they would take. And this became part of a whole north-south travel pattern between their annual trips every year up to Chicago and what then became our trips down to Florida, including after I graduated high school, me and my buddies would come down every January. And, Barb would just, the hospitality, open up the home. Like, she's already raising 2 boys, right? She needs a couple of more 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds in her home. And yet the red carpet would be rolled out and the meals would be prepared. And she would take such good care of us. In later years, my father would always make trips to Florida. And after my mom passed away, he decided every Thanksgiving we were coming down to Florida to be with Bob and Barb. And those Thanksgivings would be so special. I mean, to see her what appeared to be so effortlessly put together a meal for 40 people and just make it look so easy with a smile on her face and wonderful food. Special memories, and so Barb. My dad would then come back in March, usually for a full month, and no wonder the way that Barb pampered him. I mean, she just took care of my dad hand and foot. And hearing the story today, I hadn't heard this one before. ironing his hankies. I mean, he couldn't have a wrinkled hanky, and so I mean, Barb would iron his hankies, and it really was a very special relationship between my father and Barb. I had the pleasure in 1994 to travel to Europe, Barb and I, and it's become a little bit of a joke. Evidently, Bob was the one with the camera, because when you look at all the photos, they call it Joe and Barb's European Vacation. And while there are so many good stories I could tell about that trip, I think the one that stands out the most is the evening that Barb, and I were in the Hofbrauhaus. And of course, the German music is playing and the beer is flowing. And all of a sudden, this gypsy guy comes in and sits down at our table. And of course, typical Barb, right? As I said, in 20 minutes, she's going to know your life story and be your lifelong friend. She befriends this gypsy. And next thing you know, he's got a sketchbook out. And he's sketching this picture. He sketches the most beautiful picture of Barb. And I believe Bob still has that photo to this day. But just a typical Barb story. We can be halfway across the globe, and in 20 minutes, she's made a friend and has a keepsake to keep. But the other thing for me that stands out about the Hofbrauhaus is as the music gets going and the beer is flowing and everybody's up and dancing, well, the dance floor was crowded, so Barb decides she's going to get up and dance on the table. And she did, until security came over and we had a choice. Either she was going to get down and sit down, or we were going to get out. And so she sat down and we enjoyed probably another beer or two before making our exit. But so Barb. In more recent years, Bob and Barb would come to my Summer Lake place in Michigan and spend a month each year. And those were real special times for me to be able to spend that type of quality time with both of them. But again, typical Barb, the way that she became friends with everybody. And the people in my complex up there, when I shared the news about her passing, I mean, the people in Michigan are just as upset and devastated as we are. And yet they may have only met her 2 or 3 times, but she had that kind of impact on people. In my Michigan place, I referred to Barb as my interior decorator, because she was constantly decorating something, getting a knick-knack for this, and as I sit in that place today, I look around, all of these things are memories of Barb. And she had a classic way of wanting to organize things, which was wonderful. I mean, reorganizing my kitchen was great, but the thing was she'd come back a year later and decide to reorganize what she already organized, and so if you think you knew where something was, you couldn't find it anymore, and you'd have to pick up the phone and call her, all right, so when you reorganized for the 3rd time, where did you put the blender? But my best decorating story up in Michigan, she and Bob would stay there, like I said, for a month. I would often go home to Chicago, take the train home for a few days midweek, and come back, usually on a Thursday night. They would usually pick me up at the train station. We'd stop and have pizza at Silver Beach Pizza. Wonderful pizza, by the way, if you're ever in St. Joe, Michigan. We get done having pizza, and we get in the car, and we're heading back to my place. And Barb says to me, she says, well, I have to tell you something. She says, now, if you don't like this, you can change it, but I've rearranged the furniture in your living room. She said, I think it's much better, but if you don't like it, you can change it back the way it was. And sure enough, we get to the lake place, and the entire living room has been completely reorganized. But it's so much better. It's that way to this day. Since I retired, I've started coming to Florida, much like my father did, for a month. And for me, it was February. Dad, it was March. But the last few Februaries, I've come down here and spent a month. And I would spend most of it in a condo out on the Gulf, but several days at Bob and Barb's. But regardless of where I was staying, she always made sure that I was included in every family meal. The twice-a-week dinners that Harry was talking about that she put together, always made sure I was included in that. And this last February, it was obvious that she wasn't quite right. Didn't know what was wrong, but it was obvious that she was sick. And I'll never forget leaving for the airport for the last time and giving her this extended hug, this extra long hug, and telling her to take care of herself. It's the last time I saw her. And so as I think about the bookends of meeting her as that 7-year-old, and then that final hug in February, I just think of all of the stories in between, and there's so many. But I'm so, so thankful for that final hug.
Hey everybody, I'm Todd Williams. I'm one of the many lucky guys out here that knew Bob and Bill their whole lives, and we kind of all considered ourselves some of the extra Barber boys. There's a lot of us out here. Some of you I've seen so far, some of you I haven't, but I think we all, I know Pop and May and Bobsy, I love that one, but to us it was Mr. and Mrs. B, and they were kind of our extra parents, and we were very lucky to have them in our lives. And I'll say that God puts people in our lives for reasons that we, at the time they're in there, maybe we don't understand, and we might not realize the full impact that those people will have on our lives until much later on. But I think I met Bobby in elementary school. I don't know, we've been trying to figure this out, and Billy, I think I've known Billy since he had a heartbeat, basically. I remember diapers and, but I think it was maybe riding bikes to Bear Creek Elementary, but it comes back to sports, and we played on Little League teams together. Started Pasadena Little League, and that's kind of where I met the Barber clan. Mr. Barber coached the team. Mrs. Barber was the team mom. My dad was on the board, and I think my mom was a team mom also. But I think the key phrase there is team mom, at least for me. Growing up through middle school and high school, we would always end up together at the Barber house for whatever it was. If it was a World Series, if it was a Bucks game, and there was always a Bucks game to watch, and they would lose, obviously. But I know why we always congregated at the Barber house. It was because Mrs. Barber always took care of us, and Mr. Barber put up with us. But to me, at least personally, Mrs. B, she was the team mom for all of us growing up. And, she always wanted to know how we were doing, if we were okay, if we needed anything, how our parents were doing. And I know she was genuinely concerned about all of our well-beings. I know me personally, one time, my parents divorced in middle school, and I was having a hard time with it. And I was able to speak to Mrs. Barber about it. And just having somebody that I could talk to made it that much better that wasn't a family friend or anything like that. So, I came up with a little acronym about TEAM, and it speaks to me about Mrs. B. T is for tolerant. And, boy, we did some questionable things as kids. And, E, very easy to talk to. A, she was always there for you. And M, she made sure that everybody was taken care of. And, they say it takes a village, and the Barber family was certainly a large part of the village that helped me make me who I am today. And I'm just grateful that she was in my life. Thank you.
Spend all your time waiting for that second chance, for a break that would make it okay. There's always one reason to feel not good enough, and it's hard at the end of the day. I need some distraction, oh beautiful release. Memory seeps from my veins. Let me be empty, oh, weightless, and maybe I'll find some peace tonight. In the arms of an angel,
I sit here today and I listen to the speakers and I listen to the prayers. And I would say that we're honoring my wife to the fullest. But to stand up here today, I forgot to say that I'm going to steal Lou Gehrig's statement, and I'm the luckiest guy on the face of this earth. I'm so lucky to have shared 57 years with a beautiful woman who was my best friend. She was my rock. She was my guiding light. Barbara Dawn Barber. You've heard the names Bobsy, you've heard the names Barbs, you've heard May, but very few of you ever heard Dawn. In fact, most of you never even knew her middle name was Dawn. But how appropriate her middle name was. Dawn, the brightness before each daybreak. What a great way to start out the day. I think of her as the brightest star in the midnight sky. So bright that you can still see her when the sun is rising. She's shining. All you have to do is look, she's there. Barb was born September 13, 1950, and raised in her early years in Gulfport, Florida. Of course, if she heard me just say that, she'd be correcting me, because she says the correct pronunciation is Gulfport, Florida. Gulfport. She was proud of her small town atmosphere, growing up with 4 siblings, Jen, Harvey, Carol, Laura. She spoke about her adventurous walks, going to Gulfport Elementary School with them, maybe stopping along the way and picking up Bev Thompson or Celia Kilpatrick or someone else in the neighborhood. But it was like the Our Gang comedies. They were all together, all marching down the streets. Barb was very fond of her times in Gulfport. She especially enjoyed going to the Little League field and watching her brother Harvey play. She attended Gulfport Baptist Church, and she was baptized there. But later in life, in her early teens, they moved to St. Pete Beach. Barb always appreciated the family life, or family unit. She reminisced often about her time spent with her grandparents, Mr. and Mrs. Davies. Her mom inspired her greatly by placing the importance of family and the family values. Barb truly loved her mother. And as the years passed, they became even more inseparable. Before I continue on with Barb as a person, I want to point out the significance of Pass-A-Grille Community Church and the role it played in her life and our relationship. Behind the church, where the parking lot is currently, Barb and I lived there for 2 years in a home that was sitting right on that property. So we lived behind this church. There was a garage apartment right behind us. Her sister Jen and her husband at that time lived there also. Barb and I both joined this church in 1968. This church has meant a great deal to our marriage. Lastly, and more ironically, across the street is a Little League field. I was a 17-year-old kid umpiring a game, and my girlfriend was in the stands. She had a group of other girls with her. The game was proceeding, and the more the game went on, the louder this one girl got. And she was really riding me. That's a terrible call. Terrible call. After the game, I had to ask my girlfriend at the time, who was that was riding me so hard? Well, she's the same person that rode me for 57 years and kept me straight. But I'll say one thing, marrying her was not a bad call. So now let's talk about Barb as a person. She had many names: Barb, Mom, May. May came from the name she chose as being a grandma.
She did not want to be called Grandma. Call me May May. Of course, as time went on, and as kids grew, and things get shortened, everybody gets a nickname. Well, May May's nickname was May. Pretty obvious. May May and Pop Pop became May and Pop. Very simple, very easy. And that's probably what we're best known as today. My way of describing Barb is simple, yet it's complex. First, I'd like for you to pick any character played by Katharine Hepburn, and it could be her. Because there was determination, there was independence, there was straightforward approaches, and there's spontaneity. That could be part of Barb's DNA. An example of her Hepburn characters are, Barb often used the saying, "It is what it is, so get over it or deal with it." And that's the way Barb approached life. She very seldom ducked any issues. She would meet them on head, straight ahead, and usually she was able to win. One time she was teaching one of our boys to drive, and they stalled out the car in the middle of an intersection. Cars are honking their horns. The boy, the son was white-knuckled and just panicking. And she very simply said, in a very calm voice, "Okay, now just restart the car. Now let's get on with it." And they did just that. She had a way to calm you down when you were panicking. Another example of her independence and confidence is the day I left for work one morning, only to return and find the whole front of the house painted a different color. When I asked her why the front of the house didn't match the other 3 walls, she said, "I haven't had time to paint the rest. I will." And she did paint the rest of that house. There was also the time when she had her way of telling me that she was going to take her first job. She was not going to be a stay-at-home mom. And she was pretty clever about it. She found a restaurant that would hire her in the evening. She then told me how she was going to watch Bobby in the day and work at night. I was to work in the day and I was to watch Bobby at night. And I told her that sounded like a pretty good plan, but where is this restaurant? She said, "Well, it's about 3 miles away." I said, "Well, how are you going to get there?" I said, "You're not going to have a transportation." She said, "Oh, that's fine. I found a house that was right across the street. We're going to move." And we did. The second way I would describe Barb would be her genuine kindness and grace and sweetness and elegance, like Princess Diana. Barb had a true dedication to her salon customers, that she referred to them as friends rather than clients or customers. If the time came that her health was, one of her friends' health was challenged, she wouldn't make them come to the salon. She'd go to their house. Or if they were able to, she would just pick them up and bring them to the salon and then take them home, just so they wouldn't have to find a bus or other transportation or do without. Even as they got older, if they were widowed or widowers, maybe they were low on income, couldn't afford things, those were pro grata. She took care of her people. She wanted them to look good. She was the ultimate decorator. As Joe talked about her decorating his living room, she decorated people. She could see a vision of things and she created them. Many times I referred, instead of a beautician, I called her a magician, because she could turn things around real quick. Ironically, while she was dealing with her customers, they'd always have problems, and they would talk. Everyone talks to their hairdresser. Only the hairdresser knows for sure, right? But she would start talking with her customers, or anyone else for that matter, and she would listen. And she would hear. People would talk to her, and she would just listen and hear, listen and hear. She didn't speak a word a lot of times. 10 minutes could go by and she hadn't said a word. But what would she realize? If she let people talk long enough, they'd figure it out on their own. And right now she's listening and she's hearing. And she's going to let all of us figure it out on our own. Because she knows that if you can figure it out, you'll be all right. And we're all going to be all right. Other kind acts that Barb would do is her words of encouragement that she would pass on to young girls in need of some encouragement or confidence, teaching them to take a negative and turning it into a positive. This past week, I learned that very deeply. We've been receiving grievance cards and cards from all over the country of people whose lives Barb had touched. And the cards were very nice to read and very peaceful to us. But I opened this one card, and ironically, there was a letter enclosed. And I opened that letter, and it was from a young woman who was expressing the impact that Barb had on her life. She said no card could ever explain her feelings, which is why she's writing this letter. Talked about how her memories of Barb in the past as a little girl, and seeing Barb at a ball game sitting with this little girl's mom, and how she always recognized that Barb had a smile on her face and what an easy laugh she had. She was just always a happy person. Well, the letter then focused on the main purpose of the writing. She stated that she was self-conscious as a little girl because she had to wear a medical brace. And she was always very conscious of this. And it was required that she wear it, so she mentioned that Barb really helped her out. Barb would help her with her hair in the back room of our home. She goes on to mention the ease of confiding in Barb, and she referred to her as being like a cool aunt. Like having my cool aunt that I could talk to and say anything to. And how she helped her laugh rather than be embarrassed when the boys showed up at the house and she had perm curlers in her hair. Barb would just teach her how to laugh at the boys. That letter is an example of how Barb touched the hearts of young people. And I'm so grateful for that message from that little girl. The family is grateful for sharing that story with us. The third trait of Barb's is she was the Pied Piper of babies and young children. Barb would just try her darndest to get a baby to laugh, and then when the baby did, Barb laughed twice as hard. It was nothing to see her rocking a baby to sleep or playing peekaboo. Barb could be skateboarding with other kids, or she could be playing catch with one of her own sons. She might even fill in as one of the players when the kids were choosing up sides in the front yard and they were short one player. She'd step in and she made it to where they could play their ball in the street. She was one of a kind. One of her grandsons told me a story this week about May pitching to him, and he hit the handmade duct tape ball that Barb had made. She pitched it, he hit it, he hit her, she picked it up and she threw it at him. He was bewildered at the whole thing, and she laughed and smiled, and then he just broke down laughing because he just thought that was the funniest thing that May could do. But that's the way she was. She did all these things with that familiar smile and that twinkle in her eyes. The one that you're looking there, every picture I found of her in the last 3 weeks, they all had that same smile. They all had that same twinkle. Barb was genuine. Barb was always young at heart. She played softball, she played tennis, she bowled, and she still found time to challenge me regularly on the golf course. Our 2 sons, Bobby and Billy, were the pride and joys of her life. The countless hours of baseball fields, rushing to one game to get to another, driving from, could be to Miami or could be Georgia. It didn't matter because they were her sons, and that was their game, and she was a big part of it. It would be nothing for Barb to grab a glove, as you've heard, throw it to one of the boys and say, "Come on, your dad's late, you need to warm up, let's go." That was Barb. 3 of Barb's greatest days in life was Billy getting through his surgery successfully, Bobby becoming a fireman, and the birth of the first girl that acquired Barber blood and blessed this family, and that would be our great-granddaughter, Rulan. Rue is now joined by 4 other young girls, Ember, Olivia, Gracelyn, and Tessa. Barb always told me that her personal goal in life would be complete if she could just reach a point that she knew her 2 sons were independent and self-sufficient. Well, mission accomplished. Not only are they grown and self-sufficient, the 8 grandchildren are all grown and in some cases started their own families, blessing her with 9 great-grandchildren. As a wife to me for 57 years, she was my rock, as I said. And I must confess that I truly was blessed to have 57 wonderful years with my best friend. She was the fuel that kept my engine running. When there were challenges, she would be beside me, plan together how to fix what was broken. We had 2 separate mindsets. That didn't always think the same. But we made sure that we always thought together. She was my voice of reason, often reminding me that things are never quite as good as you think they are, but also things are never as bad as you think they are. You have to find a balance in life. She was also my biggest cheerleader, and I will miss her dearly. My request to each of you is simple. Look for that brightest star tonight. If you happen to be awake early at sunrise, go out there and look for her star. She'll still be shining. Take a simple moment and wish her good morning. Barb often said to me she believed going to church wasn't what makes you a good Christian. It's how you live your life and treat others that really determine that. I hope that everyone here today will agree with me and her that she made a strong case in her belief. Her favorite verse was one that she could recite without any hesitancy, and that was John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believed in him shall not perish but have eternal life. With Barb's belief, I ask that we pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we are thankful that you loved us so much that you sent your Son to earth to make eternal life for us possible. We rejoice in the life of Barb, and into your hands we commit her spirit and our hope. Amen.
Please rise as you're able and join with me in the reading of the 23rd Psalm as it is printed in the program. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. You may be seated. So as part of my homily, I kind of want to say a few words about the scriptures that were read during this service. From the book of Isaiah, Isaiah was one of the prophets, one of the major prophets central to the Jewish faith. And because Christianity grew from Judaism, it is also central to ours. And the prophets, for the most part, are known for saying words that afflict the comfortable, but then also saying words that comfort the afflicted. And these words from the 41st chapter are words of comfort, reassuring us that we ought not to be dismayed, and not despair, for God will provide for us strength. Often we do not know what kind of strength that is. And I could assure you it's not muscular strength or bone strength, but strength of will. Strength of character, strength that will help people, not only with the challenges that are in front of them, but the challenges that are beyond. The book of Proverbs is also a book central to the Jewish faith, and it is a collection of wisdom sayings. And these were sayings that were shared through an oral tradition of the Jewish faith. And as you go through it, you could see the wise teacher telling the young person how to live. Earlier in that Proverb 31st, of which Jenny read a portion of it, it says there to speak up for those who cannot speak, to speak up and judge fairly. And that is right before they went into the section of a wife of noble character. And I cannot help but think that the wife of noble character is also one who is able to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, one who judges fairly. The wife of noble character is one that is needed not just in the home, not just in the marriage, but in everyday life, everywhere we go. And as we listened to the remembrances of the mom that was there for everybody, that is what moms do. They speak up on behalf of those who cannot speak for themselves, and they help in those unfair situations. And then Bob read from John 3:16, a passage that is key to our Christian faith. It tells us the reason as to why Jesus became the Christ. It gives us the central point of why it is that we follow Jesus and not Moses, as to why we are to be readers of the New Testament and not so much of the Old. And that is because our God is a God of love. And that love was one that led our loving God to give his one and only Son, so that our lives might be full, so that we might experience an abundant love, a love that overflows without fear of going without, because that is truly what love is. And often, people give, and then you could see how they hesitate. Well, if I give this, I no longer have it with me, and I think I want to hold on to it because who knows, I might need it one day. Love doesn't operate that way. Love just gives, and gives wholeheartedly without fear of going without, knowing that after we give, God will provide in some form or another. And then I had us read in unison from the 23rd Psalm. If you were to take this back home with you and then read it again later on tonight, you will see that it is a psalm of movement. The psalmist is moving through different stages of life, and in the first half of the psalmist refers to God in the third person. But at some point or another, God changes to the first person, which means that in the growing and the deepening of the faith, God became more than just something that's out there. God became something that is here with me, by my side, preparing a table before me. And then the words of faith, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. That is timeless. That is timeless. It is to be not something that we are to enjoy in this life, but it's this life and in the next, in life beyond life. And that is something that our faith teaches, that there is life after this life. And so I stand here before you knowing that Barbara is alive. Not in a way that we could touch, maybe not in a way that we could understand, but her soul has moved on to be with God. And in that side of creation, that which makes Barbara so unique continues to endure. In our world, there are people who are suited for so many things, and some people for very, very specific things. We have people that are natural warriors. They're fighter. They just go out there, and those are the people that tend to end up finding a profession where their warrior skills can be exemplified. There are people who are born with the skills of teaching and very, very good with children and so forth. And then, they become that teacher that is remembered forever. And so forth. I can keep on naming all sorts of different professions, but I'm going to go ahead and zero in on Barbara's. There are people born among us that make life beautiful, that make our existence just glow with beauty. And it is no coincidence that she became a beautician, to bring out the beauty in people. That, in many ways, is an art form. That is art, to go ahead and transform a living being before you into the best possible form that they could have. And anybody that knows just the slightest bit about beauty, we recognize that beauty is not about the hair. It's not about the lines in the face. It's not about the complexion. Beauty is from within. Truly, the beautiful person, their beauty just radiates in an outward glow. There is this novel, more of a memoir by Anne Patchett. I recommend it to those of you who like to read for pleasure. And it's called Truth and Beauty. And the author goes ahead and puts forth the life of this individual, and as to how truth and beauty were there. And there were things that had to be reconciled. And by the end of the novel, you realized that the most beautiful thing in the world is the unencumbered truth. Truth sometimes is described as difficult to swallow. Truth sometimes is described as a jagged pill. I will tell you today that truth is beautiful. That the truthful life that Barbara lived, and she lived it so genuinely and authentically in everything that she did, and every testimony given here today speaks to that. Tells us that is the kind of beauty we should be reaching for. That is the kind of beauty that no makeup kit can provide. And so, to honor Barbara's life, let us live a beautiful life. A life that brings the beauty in others. And that is the beauty that is God-given, a beauty that is not blemished by our faults and our limitations and the very ugly things that we bring into it. And in this beautiful life, joy is a natural outcome. Laughter is a natural product. And most importantly, healthy relationships, not only between the siblings and the cousins and the neighbors and the friends and the teammates, but just even among those people whom you meet for 20 minutes at a time, as Joe so eloquently stated. May the beauty and the love of God, as exemplified in Barbara's life, remain with each and every one of us. May we walk away from this sanctuary with that one thing that will honor and remember her life. And so before I give the benediction, I do want to state something that the family wishes you to know, is that there's a reception and a light refreshment in our fellowship hall of this church, which is straight in that direction. And as you leave from this sanctuary, you may leave through the back or the front, either way, but just make your way over there and spend your time with the family, offering them your condolences and your beautiful stories of Barbara. And now please rise as you're able to receive the benediction. And now may the love and beauty of God our Creator, the peace of Jesus Christ, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with each and every one of us. May we go forth knowing that we are beautiful inside and out. May we go forth remembering everything that Barbara had to offer and that we ought to keep and exemplify in our own. Go in peace. Amen.
How do you do? They really say to myself, what a wonderful world. Someday I wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where trouble melts like a lemon drops high above the chimney top. That's where you find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow, way up high. And the dreams that you dare to, why, oh, why can't I?